Right guys, so I am back and it has been a little while for me because even though on the channel there has been videos over the last few days, I have been in London for the last 4 or 5 days and I just got back today and I wanted to make a video talking about testing because it happened last week and it finished on Friday. I didn't get a chance to make a video because I was away and I want to try and do more of this real life F1 content on the channel this year. So today we're going to be talking about testing week 1 and having a bit of a review and some thoughts and opinions I've got of what happened last week and also maybe some predictions and what I expect moving into next week's testing or this week's testing now on week number 2. So let's jump into it and let's see what I thought of last week's testing to kick off the 2020 F1 season. So first and foremost, let's talk about defending champions Mercedes, and I'm going to try and rattle through these relatively quickly so the video is not too long. So Mercedes of course were in the eye of the storm, and not because of their pace but because of an intricate device they've established or invented over the last few months, and they seem to have got the FIA's approval for this season, but it will be banned for 2021, and that is the DAS system, or the DAS, or the dual access system, which is pretty much a form of changing the angle of the tyres on the straights and corners to try and improve tyre wear and also tyre temperatures. So with this, Mercedes of course, this has taken away from the headlines and the fact that they look absolutely supreme once again, and without a doubt the team to beat. They racked up pretty much the most laps, and also they were by far the quickest, and Bottas on C5 tyres clocking up a 1:15.7 I believe was by far the quickest lap of testing week 1, and they look just bulletproof. There's not much more you can say. It's going to take a lot to beat the Silver Arrows because they look arguably stronger than ever, and it's depressing for me as someone who's a neutral who wants to see the things get closer, and no one's done their homework and Mercedes have, and it's disappointing to see once again, but it's reality. And the fact is Mercedes have been back-to-back champions for 6 years in a row for a reason, and this is exactly why. We then move into who I think is the second quickest team, and that is Red Bull Racing. So let's talk about Red Bull a little bit, and first of all, their car looks very impressive. Again, they look quite strong. I feel like, unlike Mercedes, they may have not shown their cards yet. They do have a few intricate devices and systems on their car, especially when it comes to the bulkhead and also the nose, the way that kind of opens up into loads of different air boxes and ways of going through the car. And generally speaking, they've got a strong lineup, and I feel like in testing week 2, we're going to see a lot more from them. I think they've kept their cards close to their chest, but without a doubt I tend to agree with what they're saying in the paddock, and that is that Red Bull are probably second quickest and probably the nearest challenger to Mercedes. And Verstappen had a couple of spins, Albon had a pretty solid test, but overall I think we're going to see what Red Bull can do in the second test, I think, whereas Mercedes may have already kind of shown a bit more of what they can do. So I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully, fingers crossed, for the benefit of neutral viewers, that Red Bull are close to the Silver Arrows. We then move into Ferrari, and I was going to put a Racing Point here, but we'll talk about Ferrari first. So they did state right on the very opening day that they're going to do things differently this year, because last year they got on the pace, they kind of led everyone to believe that they were the fastest team and they were going to be the team to beat. So they've taken a different approach this year. But having said that, by taking a different approach, they haven't exactly covered themselves in glory. They had problems with Sebastian Vettel, who had an engine issue, and also, just generally they haven't racked up that many miles. Sebastian was also ill on the first day, so Leclerc had to step in, so their schedule's been a bit messed up. And if you look at the lap count compared to other teams and drivers, it's not great. So Ferrari seem to be in trouble. Their pace also doesn't seem to be quite there. Apparently they are faster than last year in the corners, which is good, but they are still slow in those areas. So sector 3 especially, they are still a little bit slower than Red Bull and Mercedes, but they are vastly improved from last season. So there's good and bad about it. Mattia Binotto has confirmed that they do believe they're going to be a little bit off the pace, and there's going to be, I believe, some upgrades in the car for the second test, and also there's going to be apparently a full car upgrade for Melbourne. So very interesting for Ferrari, different strategy. You could argue they're probably slacking a little bit, so hopefully, fingers crossed, they can turn it around, but at the minute it's not looking great for the team in red. We then move on to Racing Point, and these guys have been, I think, the revelation of testing so far. And the reason I say the revelation is because they've pretty much done a madness. They've climbed up the order. Seemingly they're the 4th, possibly 3rd, even ahead of Ferrari, according to some rumours in the paddock. Possibly the 3rd quickest team, and they've done this by, of course, copycatting or mimicking the Mercedes from last season. And I'm sure you guys have seen it by now on the internet. There's multiple pictures. If you compare last season's Mercedes and this season's Racing Point RP20 side by side, they are identical. Racing Point have confirmed that they've not received any parts or haven't had anything given to them from Mercedes. It's just something that they've worked upon for a long time, with pictures, wind tunnel work, and just generally trying to copy it and from Bays, so pretty much a copy and paste job from Racing Point, you know, and they've done a bloody good job with it, and fair play to them, because, you know, that method is there for everybody to use and everybody could copy Mercedes' car, but they don't. And you know, Racing Point have definitely taken a step forward, it seems, over the winter. Again, yet to be 100% confirmed. We don't know what McLaren are doing yet, Renault as well, but for now it's looking good for the Pink Panthers. We're now going to talk about McLaren, and a very solid test for them. You know, the last couple of seasons they have had some rough pre-season tests. You know, they have struggled to get mileage in, but the car looks very reliable. Even with that Renault power unit, they seem to be very, very strong. Pace overall seems solid, and also their drivers got a decent amount of laps in. There's not much to say about them. Nothing really stood out. I feel like, again, they're one of those teams that are holding something back, I feel like, for next week or this week's testing. And again, with the second test, you're going to see more teams go for maybe some lower fuel runs and try and go for a few more hot laps. So I think we'll get a better indication at the end of this week's test. But McLaren definitely keeping their cards close to their chest. You know, looking at the teams around them, you know, Renault, Racing Point, AlphaTauri, there's a good few teams there that look very strong and competitive, and I think that we need to see something from McLaren to see that they're going to at least hold on to that fourth place, or maybe even possibly challenge for third if Ferrari are led to believe to be struggling as much as they are. So I think McLaren, we're going to see this week exactly what they're made of. We then move into Renault, the French team, and again, a very interesting start to Renault. They didn't do a proper car launch, it was all kind of digital pictures, and they just rocked up, you know, the first set of testing and just hit the track with the all black Renault, which looked fantastic. You know, the all black livery with the glossy paint looking absolutely unreal. And they've also gone for a Mercedes style skinny nose, which seems to be the trend this year with the Racing Point, Renault, Red Bull, McLaren as well. Lots of teams going for that philosophy, and it seems to be the way to go. And the Renault, to be fair, I think there is a good car there. I think they've taken a step forward on reliability as well. It seems like they've really improved, and there are some rumours going around that Renault have taken a massive step forward with the engine, which is what they needed to kind of match Honda in the last year to really, you know, take it to the Ferraris and Mercedes power units. So yeah, really, really good stuff from Renault so far. I'm actually quite impressed. And Ocon and Ricciardo, a very strong lineup. They got a lot of laps in, both of them. And again, I feel like they're another team where they did do a couple of quick laps with Ocon as well, especially. But I feel like they're yet to show their true outright pace. But yeah, Ricciardo had a couple of spins, I believe, towards the end of the lap. But generally speaking, that Renault does look better than last year, and an improvement overall. And I think McLaren, Renault, Racing Point, there's going to be a very exciting scrap there for that kind of upper midfield slot, you know. So it's going to be really, really exciting. But we're now going to move into the next team. And that team is going to be AlphaTauri, which is of course formerly known as Toro Rosso. And after various debates on social media, people saying AlphaTauri, in the end I believe the name is AlphaTauri, based off of what Pierre Gasly, Danica Fiat and also Franz Tost, you know, everybody involved with the team keeps saying, because AlphaTauri sounds like something else associated to politics, at least in Britain anyway. So AlphaTauri, they had a great first test. Of course the car looked good, the Honda power unit works good in that car, and also the Red Bull. Of course, we know they do get the entire rear end of the car with suspension and also rear wing and just general bodywork from Red Bull, so they have got a good base there. I believe this year they've got more than ever, because if you look at this year's AlphaTauri car compared to last season's Red Bull, they're very, very similar. So I feel like more and more that relationship is getting stronger, and Red Bull definitely helping out their sister team a little bit more, which is good to see because it makes things more competitive. And again, both of the drivers racked up a decent amount of laps. Reliability looks bulletproof on the Honda now, which is something I never thought I'd say, but both cars and both teams rather looking very, very strong going into week 2. But I feel like again they're another team where they could be a dark horse. No one's really put them that high up in terms of maybe McLaren, Renault and Racing Point, but maybe they could spring a surprise. Again, once the lap times pick up a little bit in testing week 2, we might know more about them. But at the minute, all we know is they are bulletproof in terms of reliability, and they look like a very solid package. Up next, it's the American team Haas, and this year, of course, they've gone back to their roots with their traditional white, red and black livery, removing the rich energy stuff, and a very nice looking car. And also in terms of aerodynamic and the way it looks aesthetically, very similar to last year's Ferrari, going for the low downforce philosophy it seems. And they were pretty hard on the speed traps, as you'd expect them to be. Ferrari cars generally not turning their engine up that much, but having said that, Haas seem to have a very similar tendency to what Ferrari had last year. Both of their cars had crashes. Grosjean and Magnussen both had incidents, and they were the only two. I think they were the only team to actually have 2 incidents in testing. So lack of mileage for them, you know, having a couple of issues. Not the smoothest first test, and definitely not exactly the start they wanted to get off to. But you know, in terms of other positives for them, it feels like they have a better package than last year, which is something that's really, really important for them. They haven't quite got the mileage out of it just yet, but it seems like initial signs are good for them, and they at least have a solid foundation to build from for this year compared to last year, where they just never were able to get on top of the car and understand why the issues were happening. So at least that's a good thing for them, but they definitely have a lot of work to do in testing week 2. I think they're going to need to try and do a lot of mileage and also improve their pace a little bit, because it seems like they're a bit of an unknown at the minute, and I had Haas as last team in terms of my predictions this season, and who knows, it looks like I could be maybe onto something. We'll have to wait and see in terms of what happens to them. We then move into Alfa Romeo, and overall I've got to say their car wasn't the step forward I hoped for it to be. You know, they revealed their car and it wasn't drastically different to last season, towards the end of last season, and there was a few little differences here and there, but if you look past livery, the car hasn't changed majorly. So again, they're another team that's gone for the wide nose philosophy that Ferrari and Haas have got, and also Williams, and I'm not 100% confident with Alfa Romeo at the minute. You know, they lost Simone Resta, who went back to Ferrari, I believe, and you can kind of see the car's lacking a little bit. They did set some good pace. I believe Kimi went fastest in day number 2, but that was, I believe, confirmed to be a very low fuel run. So we'll see what happens there in terms of what they could do. But at the minute, I feel like I'm not majorly confident with Alfa Romeo at the minute. And again, in my predictions, I didn't have them too high up. I had them in 7th place, I believe, and I feel like that could be pretty close to the real thing. You know, they've taken, I want to say, a sideways step, not even a forward or a backward step, just kind of stayed the same this season at the minute based off of testing week 1. So we'll see what happens in week 2 when, you know, everyone turns up their engines and picks up the pace. But for now, it seems like Alfa could be in a little bit of trouble maybe. I might be over exaggerating or panicking a bit too much, but at the minute I'm not 100% confident with their car at this moment in time. And finally, we have Williams, and of course they last season had a horrific preseason test where they turned up late, they missed loads of running, and this season it was the opposite. They were the very first car onto the racetrack, proving that they have turned a corner, and Russell going about a second quicker than his qualifying lap from last season at the Spanish Grand Prix in just his first test week alone. So fair play to them, they look massively improved. Having said that, their car is not a game changer. I feel like they've taken a step forward in terms of not being last and potentially maybe cutting that gap and maybe fighting for the lower positions with Haas, Alfa Romeo, I feel like. But other than that, I don't think they've taken much more of a step forward. The good thing is, though, is that they're in the mix and they're not at the bottom, which is what we want to see. We don't want to see no team struggling at the bottom, because it's very difficult to see, you know, a team, especially like Williams with so much history, to really struggle as it has been for the last couple of years. So it's good to see them taking a step forward, and hopefully, fingers crossed, they can try and build on that momentum and improve. But of course, testing week 2 yet to come, so you never know what can happen with them. They might bring some upgrades, maybe try and improve a little bit. But for now, that car looks like a solid start for them. Hopefully they can upgrade it as the season progresses, but for now, Williams looking good, a step forward, and I want to say fighting maybe for the tail end of things, possibly for some points. Like I said in my predictions, maybe George Russell could score a point here or there on the odd race. But other than that, guys, that is going to be it for my review of testing week 1. Mercedes as strong as ever, and there's no outright bottom team, so that's good to see. And the question is, who's going to be the team to break into the top 3? And, you know, do Red Bull and Ferrari have an answer to the Mercedes dominance? So let's find out. Hopefully in testing week 2 we get some more answers. But guys, that's going to be it for this video here today. If you guys enjoyed it, drop a big thumbs up on the video. Also subscribe down below, guys, by clicking the red button, and also click the bell notifications icon on the right hand side to be notified as to when I upload future content on the channel. But guys, also just check out these 2 videos on the screen if you have missed them by chance. You know, I have been away, but there has been plenty of content out on the channel while I have been in London. But that is going to be it for this video here today, guys, and I'll see you in my next one very soon. But until then, it's goodbye from me.